The conference room smelled like expensive leather and ambition. The kind of place where deals worth millions were sealed with a handshake and a smile that never quite reached the eyes. It was a Tuesday afternoon in downtown Chicago, in one of those glass towers that seemed to scrape the clouds themselves. The autumn sun filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table where several people sat waiting. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Among them was Michael Harrison, a 52-year-old man with silver streaks running through his dark hair and the kind of calm demeanor that comes from years of facing real danger. He wore a faded denim jacket over a plain white shirt, jeans with a small tear at the knee, and scuffed sneakers that had walked more miles than most people could imagine. A small American flag pin sat quietly on his collar, barely noticeable unless someone looked closely. His weathered hands rested on the table, fingers interlaced, and he sat with the posture of someone who had nothing to prove. To everyone in that room, Michael looked completely out of place. Like someone who had taken a wrong turn and ended up in a corporate battlefield where he clearly didn't belong. His daughter Emma sat beside him, a bright 24-year-old with nervous energy radiating from every movement. She kept glancing at her father with a mixture of pride and anxiety, knowing what was coming but uncertain how it would unfold. Across the table sat Victoria Ashford, a woman whose presence demanded attention the moment she entered any room. At 48, she had built a tech empire worth over $3 billion, and she wore that success like armor. Her charcoal gray designer suit probably cost more than most people earned in 6 months. Diamond earrings caught the light with every tilt of her head. Her jet black hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face into a permanent expression of superiority. She had the look of someone who had spent decades crushing competitors and never once lost sleep over it. Victoria's assistant, a young man named Brandon who couldn't have been older than 25, sat to her right with a tablet and an expression of practiced indifference. 2 lawyers flanked her on either side, both in suits that screamed money and power. They shuffled papers and whispered among themselves, occasionally glancing at Michael with barely concealed contempt. The meeting had been arranged weeks ago. Emma had secured a potential partnership with Ashford Technologies, a deal that could launch her small translation and cultural consulting startup into real prominence. She had worked tirelessly for 2 years building her business from nothing, taking on small clients and gradually building a reputation for quality work. This meeting represented everything she had been working toward. But Victoria Ashford didn't do small deals. She consumed companies, absorbed their assets, and moved on. Emma knew the risk, but she also knew the opportunity. If she could navigate this negotiation successfully, her company would have access to international markets she could only dream about. Michael had offered to come along for moral support. Emma had hesitated at first, worried that bringing her father to such a high-stakes meeting might seem unprofessional. But Michael had insisted gently, the way fathers do when they know their children need them even if they won't admit it. So there he sat, quiet and unassuming, while his daughter prepared to fight the biggest battle of her professional life. Victoria checked her watch, a gesture so deliberate it was clearly meant to communicate her impatience. "Can we begin?" Her voice carried the sharp edge of someone accustomed to instant obedience. "I have another meeting in 40 minutes. Emma straightened in her chair, pulling out a folder of documents she had prepared. "Yes, of course. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us, Miss Ashford. I've prepared a comprehensive proposal that outlines how our partnership could. I've seen your proposal." Victoria cut her off with a wave of her hand, her tone dismissive. "It's adequate." "Barely. What I need to know is whether you can actually deliver on these promises or if you're just another small-timer wasting my time." Emma's face flushed, but she maintained her composure. "I assure you, Miss Ashford, we have an excellent track record. Our client satisfaction rate is numbers on paper." Victoria interrupted again, leaning back in her chair. "Anyone can fabricate statistics. What I need is proof of competence. Real-world application." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick document bound in leather. The pages were filled with dense text in what appeared to be Chinese characters. She slid it across the table toward Emma with casual disdain. "This is a contract with one of our suppliers in Shanghai. 37 pages. Technical specifications, delivery schedules, payment terms, penalty clauses. If your company is as good as you claim, you should be able to translate this accurately and explain every nuance. I need it done by Thursday." Emma picked up the document, her eyes scanning the pages. Her Mandarin was decent, good enough for basic business communication, but this was something else entirely. The language was formal, filled with legal terminology and technical jargon that would take days to properly translate even with a team. Her heart sank as she realized the impossibility of the task within the given time frame. Victoria watched her reaction with the satisfied smile of a predator who had just cornered its prey. "Problem?" she asked, though her tone made it clear she already knew the answer. "I can do it," Emma said, though her voice wavered slightly. "It will require some additional time to ensure accuracy, but Thursday," Victoria repeated, her voice hard as steel. "That's the deadline. Non-negotiable. In fact, let's make this more interesting. If you can have a complete, accurate translation on my desk by Thursday morning, we'll move forward with the partnership on your terms. If you can't, you withdraw your proposal entirely and I never hear from you again. Deal?" It was a trap, and Emma knew it. Victoria was setting her up to fail, probably to justify acquiring her company at a fraction of its worth once Emma was desperate enough. But what choice did she have? Walking away meant losing the opportunity entirely. At least this way there was a chance, however slim. Emma opened her mouth to accept the impossible terms when Michael spoke for the first time since entering the room. "May I see that?" His voice was quiet, polite, almost apologetic for interrupting. Everyone's attention shifted to him. Victoria's eyes narrowed as if noticing him for the first time. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly?" "This is my father," Emma said quickly, protectively. "He came for support." "Dad, it's okay. I can handle. I'd just like to look at the document," Michael said again, reaching across the table. His tone remained gentle, but there was something in his eyes, a steadiness that hadn't been there before. Victoria let out a short, derisive laugh. "Your father?" She looked Michael up and down, taking in his casual clothes and worn appearance. "What is he, your bodyguard?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Does he even know what we're discussing here? Brandon, the assistant, smirked. One of the lawyers actually chuckled. "Miss Ashford, please," Emma said, her face reddening with embarrassment and anger. "There's no need to be rude." "Rude?" Victoria's eyebrows arched. "I'm simply trying to understand why we're wasting time passing corporate documents to someone who looks like he just came from changing oil in someone's garage." She turned her cold gaze back to Michael. "No offense, but this is a business meeting. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable waiting outside." Michael didn't react to the insult. He simply held Victoria's gaze with that same calm steadiness. "None taken," he said evenly. "But I'd still like to see the contract." Something about his complete lack of defensiveness seemed to irritate Victoria even more. She grabbed the document and practically threw it across the table toward him. "Fine. Knock yourself out. Maybe you can give your daughter some fatherly advice about biting off more than she can chew." Michael caught the document smoothly and began reading. His eyes moved across the pages with surprising speed, taking in the Chinese characters without any apparent difficulty. The room fell into an awkward silence. Emma watched her father with growing confusion. She knew he had traveled extensively during his military service, but she had no idea he could read Chinese. After about 2 minutes, Michael looked up. "This is a supply agreement for semiconductor components," he said in Mandarin, his pronunciation flawless and his tone completely natural. The words flowed from him as if he had been speaking the language his entire life. "The supplier is Tianlong Electronics based in Shanghai." They're agreeing to deliver 50,000 units per quarter with a maximum defect rate of 0.3%. Payment terms are net 60 with a 15% penalty for late delivery. There's also a currency fluctuation clause that seems heavily weighted in favor of the supplier. The room went completely silent. Victoria's expression froze, her smile disappearing like ice under sudden heat. Brandon's mouth actually fell open. The lawyers stopped shuffling their papers and stared. Michael continued, still speaking in Mandarin, his finger tracing down the pages. Section 7 outlines quality control procedures. They're requiring third-party inspection at your expense, which is unusual. Section 12 has intellectual property protections, but they're vague enough that Tianlong could potentially share your specifications with competitors. And this clause here in Section 19, this is problematic. It's written in a way that makes it sound like standard arbitration language, but actually it means any disputes have to be settled in Shanghai using Chinese commercial law, which puts you at a significant disadvantage. He looked up at Victoria, who seemed to have temporarily lost the ability to speak. This contract isn't just unfavorable, Michael said, switching back to English. It's designed to trap you. Whoever drafted this for Tianlong knew exactly what they were doing. They're banking on you not catching these details until it's too late. Victoria's face had gone through several shades of emotion in the span of 30 seconds. Shock, confusion, and now something that looked uncomfortably close to panic. She reached across the table and snatched the document back from Michael's hands, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the leather binding. Her eyes darted across the Chinese characters as if she could suddenly decipher them through sheer force of will. That's impossible, she muttered, though her voice had lost its earlier confidence. How could you possibly know all that from just glancing at it? Michael simply folded his hands on the table again, returning to his previous posture of quiet observation. I read it, he said simply. Brandon leaned over to Victoria and whispered something urgent in her ear. She shook her head sharply, dismissing whatever he had said. One of the lawyers, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat nervously. Miss Ashford, perhaps we should verify the accuracy of his translation before we— I know it's accurate, Victoria snapped, her composure cracking further. She had built her empire on reading people, on knowing when someone was bluffing or posturing. And something in Michael's absolute certainty told her he wasn't doing either. She looked at Emma with barely concealed fury. You brought in a ringer. This was a setup from the beginning. Emma looked just as stunned as everyone else in the room. I had no idea, she said honestly. Dad, how do you speak Mandarin? Michael gave his daughter a small, apologetic smile. You never asked. The simple response seemed to infuriate Victoria even more. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. This meeting is over. I don't appreciate being made a fool of. Brandon, call security. Wait, Michael said, his voice still calm but carrying a note of authority that made everyone pause. You challenged my daughter to translate that document by Thursday. I just did it for you in less than 5 minutes. And I pointed out several major problems that could have cost your company millions. Seems to me like you should be saying thank you. Victoria's jaw clenched so tightly a muscle twitched in her cheek. You think you're clever, showing off your party trick? I've dealt with translators before. You probably rehearsed that whole speech. For all I know, you could be making up half of what you just said. Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, then slid it across the table to Victoria. Call Chen Wei, your contact at Tianlong Electronics. His number is right there. Ask him about the contract. Specifically ask him about Section 19 and whether he intentionally structured the arbitration clause to disadvantage foreign partners. See what he says. Victoria stared at the phone like it might bite her. How do you have his personal number? Make the call, Michael said quietly. Or don't. But if you sign that contract without major revisions, you'll regret it within 6 months. The room held its breath. Victoria's hand hovered over the phone, her pride warring with her business instincts. Finally, she grabbed it and walked to the far corner of the room, dialing the number. The conversation that followed was in Mandarin, quick and tense. Michael could hear every word from across the room, though he gave no indication he was listening. Victoria's body language told the whole story. Her shoulders stiffened. Her free hand clenched into a fist. Her voice rose sharply at one point before she forcibly controlled it. When she ended the call 5 minutes later, her face had gone pale beneath her makeup. She walked back to the table slowly and set Michael's phone down with exaggerated care. She didn't sit. She didn't speak. She just stood there, visibly trying to process what had just happened. Emma broke the silence. What did he say? Victoria ignored her, focusing entirely on Michael. Who are you? It wasn't a casual question anymore. It was a demand. Michael picked up his phone and slipped it back into his pocket. Just a dad supporting his daughter. That's not an answer. Victoria's voice had gone dangerously quiet. You don't just casually read technical Mandarin like it's a grocery list. You don't have the personal cell phone number of a manufacturing executive in Shanghai unless you've done business at a very high level. So I'll ask you again. Who are you? Does it matter? Michael asked. The important thing is that my daughter's company can handle the work you need. Better than you apparently realized. One of the lawyers, the woman who had been silent until now, suddenly leaned forward and squinted at Michael's flag pin. Harrison, she said slowly. Michael Harrison. Oh my God. Are you the Michael Harrison who ran Pacific Rim Logistics? The other lawyer's eyes went wide. Even Brandon seemed to recognize the name, his fingers flying across his tablet screen. Victoria's expression shifted from anger to something closer to horror. Pacific Rim Logistics, the female lawyer continued, her voice gaining confidence. You built it from nothing in the 90s, specialized in Asian markets, particularly China and Japan. By 2005, you were handling over $2 billion in trade annually. You sold the company in 2008 for, what was it, $450 million? Michael's expression didn't change. $470 million. But who's counting? The air seemed to leave the room. Emma turned to stare at her father with her mouth open. $470 million? Dad, you never told me. It was a long time ago, Michael said, his tone suggesting the topic wasn't particularly interesting to him. Different life. Victoria slowly sank back into her chair, all her earlier arrogance evaporated. She looked like someone who had just stepped on what she thought was solid ground only to discover it was thin ice. You're that Michael Harrison. The one they called the gateway to Asia. You spoke 7 languages, had personal relationships with CEOs and government officials across the Pacific. You were legendary in international trade circles. 8 languages, Michael corrected mildly. But I'm rusty on my Korean. Brandon was reading from his tablet, his voice shaking slightly. It says here you also served in naval intelligence for 12 years before going into business. Stationed in Japan, South Korea, and did classified work in China. You were recruited by 3 different Fortune 500 companies before starting your own firm. Multiple industry awards. Featured in Forbes, Wall Street Journal, International Business Times. He looked up from the screen. Sir, you're basically a legend. Michael shrugged. I'm retired. Have been for 15 years. These days I mostly fix things around the house and embarrass my daughter at business meetings. Emma was still processing, her mind racing to reconcile the father she knew with this revealed history. Why didn't you ever tell me any of this? All those times I was struggling with Chinese clients, dealing with cultural barriers, trying to figure out Asian business protocols, you just let me struggle? You needed to learn for yourself, Michael said gently. If I'd just given you all the answers, you wouldn't have built the instincts you have now. You wouldn't have earned the respect of your clients through your own effort. You needed to become good at this for your own reasons, not because you were trading on your father's reputation. But you could have helped, Emma protested, though her voice held more hurt than anger. I am helping, Michael said, gesturing around the room. Right now. Victoria had been sitting in stunned silence, but now she seemed to snap back to herself. Her business instincts, honed over decades, began to calculate new angles. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice now carefully respectful, "I may have been hasty in my initial assessment. Clearly your daughter has access to resources and expertise I didn't fully appreciate. Perhaps we should start this conversation over." "Perhaps you should apologize first," Michael said, his voice still mild but carrying an edge now. "To Emma. For the way you spoke to her. For setting her up to fail with an impossible task just so you could lowball her company later." Victoria's face flushed. She wasn't used to being called out so directly, especially not in front of her staff and lawyers. "I was simply testing her capabilities." "You were being cruel," Michael corrected. "There's a difference between due diligence and deliberate humiliation. My daughter worked hard to get this meeting with you. She prepared thoroughly. She came here in good faith. And you treated her like she was beneath your notice." The lawyer with the wire-rimmed glasses shifted uncomfortably. Brandon suddenly found his tablet screen fascinating. The other lawyer coughed quietly. Victoria's mouth opened and closed several times before she finally managed to speak. "You're right," she said, the words clearly painful for her. She turned to Emma. "I apologize. That was unprofessional of me. I've been in this business so long I sometimes forget that being tough doesn't mean being cruel." Emma nodded slowly, accepting the apology though her expression remained guarded. "Thank you." However, Victoria continued, her business mask sliding back into place, "that still doesn't change the fundamental question of capability. Your company is small. This partnership would require handling contracts in multiple languages, coordinating with suppliers across Asia, managing cultural sensitivities with clients from very different backgrounds. Can you honestly tell me you're prepared for that scale?" Before Emma could answer, Michael spoke again. "She is. Because I'm going to help her." Everyone turned to look at him. Emma's eyes went wide. "Dad, you're retired. You said you were done with business." "I said I was done building empires," Michael clarified. "But helping my daughter succeed? That's not business. That's family." He looked at Victoria. "Here's what's going to happen. Emma's company will handle your translation and cultural consulting needs. I'll act as a senior advisor, providing guidance and leveraging my contacts when necessary. But make no mistake, Emma runs her company. She makes the decisions. I'm just there to support her." Victoria's calculating mind was already working through the implications. Having Michael Harrison, even in an advisory capacity, would open doors her company had been trying to break through for years. His reputation and connections in Asian markets were still legendary, even after 15 years of retirement. This could be worth far more than the modest partnership she had originally planned to offer. "What are your terms?" Victoria asked, looking at Emma now with genuine interest instead of dismissal. Emma took a breath, her confidence returning. She pulled out another folder from her briefcase, this one containing her real proposal, not the watered-down version she had planned to present. "Full partnership, not acquisition. My company maintains operational independence. Profit sharing at 35% for the first 2 years, renegotiable after that based on performance. And I want a seat on your board of advisors for Asia-Pacific operations." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "That's aggressive." "That's fair," Emma countered. "You get access to expertise and contacts that would take you a decade to develop on your own. You get quality work that will prevent disasters like that Shanghai contract. And you get it all without having to build an entire division from scratch. 35% is a bargain for what we're offering." The room went quiet again as Victoria considered. Her lawyers leaned in to whisper urgent calculations and recommendations. Brandon pulled up spreadsheets on his tablet, running numbers. Victoria sat back in her chair, her fingers steepled under her chin, studying Emma with new eyes. Finally, she smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, not the predatory expression from earlier. "You drive a hard bargain, Miss Harrison. I can see the apple didn't fall far from the tree. She extended her hand across the table. You have a deal. My lawyers will draft the contract by Monday. Emma shook her hand, trying to keep her own hand from trembling with the adrenaline and relief flooding through her. Monday works. As Victoria gathered her materials and prepared to leave, she paused next to Michael. I underestimated you, she said quietly. That was foolish of me. I won't make that mistake again. Most people do, Michael said without any hint of smugness. I find it useful sometimes. You learn more about people when they think you don't matter. Victoria nodded slowly, understanding the lesson. Your daughter is lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one, Michael replied. She's accomplished all this without any help from me. Today was just about making sure she got a fair shot. After Victoria and her entourage left, Emma and Michael sat alone in the conference room. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting different shadows now. Emma turned to her father, emotions warring across her face. $470 million, Dad. You sold your company for nearly $500 million and you never said a word. We lived in that modest house. You drove that old truck. You never acted like you had money. Michael smiled. I donated most of it. Veterans organizations, schools, community programs. Kept enough to be comfortable, to make sure you and your brother could go to college without debt. The rest, I didn't need it. Money's only useful when it helps people. But you could have had anything. You could have stayed in business, built an even bigger empire. I had what I wanted, Michael said. A good life. A family. Time to watch my kids grow up instead of spending all my time in airports and conference rooms. That's worth more than any amount of money. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I spent years struggling, building this business from nothing. There were so many times I wanted to give up. And you could have just made one phone call and opened every door for me. Would you have wanted that? Michael asked gently. Emma thought about it, then slowly shook her head. No. I guess not. I needed to know I could do it myself. And now you know, Michael said. Everything you accomplished, you did on your own merit. Today didn't change that. All I did was make sure you got judged fairly instead of being dismissed before you even had a chance. Emma wiped her eyes and laughed. You know what the crazy thing is? I brought you here because I thought you'd be proud of me for getting this meeting. I had no idea you were going to basically save the whole deal. I was already proud of you, Michael said. The moment you told me you were starting your own business. The meeting was just icing on the cake. He stood and stretched, his joints popping quietly. Though I have to admit, it felt good to use those old skills again. Been a while since I read a Chinese contract. 8 languages, Emma said, shaking her head in wonder. Naval intelligence. $470 million. Dad, I feel like I don't even know you. You know everything that matters, Michael assured her. The rest is just history. They left the building together, walking out into the Chicago afternoon. The city buzzed around them, people rushing past with their own urgent business, completely unaware of what had just transpired in that conference room. Emma's phone began buzzing with messages, probably Victoria's lawyers already starting on the contract drafts. I'm buying you dinner, Emma announced. The most expensive restaurant I can find. You deserve it. How about we just get pizza? Michael suggested. That place near your apartment makes that deep dish you like. Emma laughed. A man who turned down billions and continued business for family time definitely doesn't need fancy restaurants. Pizza it is. As they walked toward the parking garage, Emma slipped her arm through her father's. Thank you, Dad. Not just for today. For everything. For letting me fail and struggle and figure things out. For believing I could do it even when I didn't believe in myself. That's what fathers do, Michael said simply. We believe in our kids until they learn to believe in themselves. Behind them, through the glass windows of the tower, Victoria stood in her own office watching them walk away. She had already called Chen Wei back and started renegotiating the Shanghai contract. She had also called 3 other business contacts, people she had been trying unsuccessfully to reach for months. Mentioning that she was now working with Emma Harrison, daughter of Michael Harrison, had gotten her through to all of them immediately. She smiled to herself, a mixture of respect and calculation. She had been outmaneuvered today, but she was smart enough to recognize opportunity when she saw it. This partnership was going to be very profitable. And she had learned something valuable about assumptions and first impressions. Her assistant Brandon knocked and entered. "Ma'am, the preliminary research on Emma Harrison's company is complete. Her client satisfaction rate really is as high as she claimed. She's built solid relationships with medium-sized firms all across the Midwest. Several of her clients specifically mentioned her integrity and attention to cultural nuance." "Of course they did," Victoria said. "She learned from the best, even if she didn't know it at the time." She turned away from the window. "Make sure the contract we draft is fair. Actually fair, not our usual starting position. I want this partnership to work." Brandon looked surprised. "That's not usually your approach." "My usual approach almost cost me millions in Shanghai and lost me access to someone who could have been a valuable partner," Victoria said. "Sometimes you have to admit when you're wrong and adjust. That's how you stay successful." She sat down at her desk and pulled up her calendar. "And Brandon? Clear my schedule for Thursday afternoon. I want to take Emma Harrison to lunch. A proper welcome to the partnership. Somewhere nice." "Yes, ma'am." Brandon made the note and left. Victoria pulled out the Shanghai contract again, looking at the sections Michael had pointed out. Every single thing he had said was correct. She had been so focused on what she thought was a good deal that she had missed the trap being laid. It was humbling, and Victoria wasn't used to feeling humbled. She thought about Michael Harrison sitting in that conference room in his faded jacket and worn shoes, looking like he had wandered in from a completely different world. She had judged him instantly, dismissed him as irrelevant. And he had let her, probably knowing exactly what she was thinking. Then he had quietly dismantled every assumption she had made with nothing more than competence and calm certainty. It was a lesson she wouldn't forget. And as much as it stung her pride to admit it, she was glad she had learned it before making a much more costly mistake. 3 days had passed since the meeting at Victoria's Tower, and Emma still felt like she was living in someone else's life. The contract had arrived Monday afternoon as promised, and to her surprise, it was everything she had asked for and more. Victoria's lawyers had included provisions Emma hadn't even thought to request, protections and benefits that showed genuine investment in a long-term partnership rather than a quick exploitation of resources. Emma sat in her small office, a converted loft space in a renovated warehouse on the west side of Chicago. Exposed brick walls, second-hand furniture, and a coffee maker that worked half the time. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. She had built this from scratch, taking translation jobs that barely paid rent, gradually working her way up to consulting gigs, then landing corporate clients. Every piece of furniture, every client relationship, every success represented hours of work and occasional tears of frustration. Her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant, Rachel, who worked part-time while finishing her linguistics degree. "That reporter from Business Weekly is here for your interview. Should I send her up?" Emma had forgotten about the interview. A local business publication had reached out last week wanting to do a feature on emerging entrepreneurs. The timing now seemed almost comically appropriate. She typed back a quick response telling Rachel to give her 5 minutes. She looked at herself in the small mirror she kept by her desk. Professional blouse, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked like what she was, a young businesswoman trying to make it in a competitive world. What she didn't look like was the daughter of a man who had once commanded rooms full of international executives and negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions. The reporter who walked into her office was a woman in her 30s named Jennifer Park, carrying a notebook and wearing an expression of friendly professionalism. They shook hands and settled into the worn leather chairs Emma had rescued from a estate sale. "Thank you for making time," Jennifer said, clicking her pen. I've been following your company's growth for about a year now. You've built something impressive. Thank you, Emma said. Though impressive might be generous. We're still pretty small. Small but growing, Jennifer countered. My research shows you've tripled your client base in the last 18 months. That's significant. She consulted her notes. What I'm most interested in is your approach. Most translation services focus purely on linguistic accuracy, but you've built your reputation on cultural consulting. Why that angle? Emma leaned back, considering her answer. Language is just the beginning of communication. You can translate words perfectly and still completely miss what someone means. Cultural context, business etiquette, unspoken expectations, those things matter just as much as getting the grammar right. Maybe more. Can you give me an example? Sure. I had a client last year trying to negotiate with a Japanese manufacturing firm. The Japanese executive kept saying their proposal was difficult. My client heard that as a challenge to overcome. But in Japanese business culture, difficult is often a polite way of saying no. The relationship was heading toward disaster because of that misunderstanding. I helped them recognize what was really being communicated and adjust their approach accordingly. Jennifer scribbled notes rapidly. That's exactly the kind of insight I'm talking about. Where did you develop that sensitivity? Did you study abroad? Some, Emma said. But mostly I learned by making mistakes and paying attention. My early clients were very patient with me while I figured things out. She paused, then added, and I had good teachers, even if I didn't realize it at the time. Before Jennifer could ask what she meant, Emma's phone buzzed again. A text from her father. Proud of you. Don't forget to mention the work, not just the results. People connect with process. Emma smiled. Even now, he was quietly coaching from the sidelines. The interview continued for another 30 minutes, covering her business philosophy, her challenges as a young entrepreneur, and her plans for growth. Jennifer was thorough and insightful, asking questions that made Emma think carefully about her answers. Finally, Jennifer closed her notebook and said, "One last thing. I heard a rumor that you just signed a major partnership with Ashford Technologies. Can you confirm?" Emma hesitated. The contract had confidentiality clauses, but the basic fact of the partnership was public information. I can confirm we're working together, yes. That's a huge leap for a company your size, Jennifer observed. Victoria Ashford isn't known for taking chances on small firms. How did you convince her? I didn't, Emma said honestly. She convinced herself. I just had to show her what we could do. Jennifer studied her for a moment, sensing there was more to the story. There's a narrative here about the underdog making good. Young woman builds business from nothing, lands major contract with billion-dollar corporation. It's compelling. Maybe, Emma said. But I'd rather the narrative be about competence and quality work. The underdog story is nice, but it shouldn't be the only reason people take you seriously. Jennifer smiled. That's a good answer. Mind if I quote you on that? Please do. After Jennifer left, Emma sat alone in her office watching the afternoon sun paint shadows across her desk. Her phone rang. Victoria Ashford. Emma answered with a professional greeting. I need you in New York tomorrow, Victoria said without preamble. Morning meeting with a potential client. Japanese investment firm looking to expand into American markets. They specifically requested someone who understands both business cultures. I immediately thought of you. Emma's mind raced. New York was expensive on short notice. She'd need to reschedule 2 client meetings. Rachel would have to handle the office alone. Tomorrow is tight. Can we push it to Thursday? They're only in town until Wednesday, Victoria said. This is important, Emma. First big test of our partnership. I need you there. Emma took a breath. Okay. Send me the details. I'll make it work. Good. And Emma? Bring your father if he's available. This firm is old school, traditional. Having someone with his reputation and experience in the room would help. After hanging up, Emma immediately called Michael. He answered on the second ring, sounding slightly out of breath. Hey sweetie. What's up? Are you busy tomorrow? Depends. What do you need? Emma explained the situation. There was a pause on the other end of the line. New York is a long way to go for a meeting, Michael said carefully. Are you sure you need me there? This is your company, your deal. Victoria specifically asked. She thinks your presence would help with the client. Another pause. What do you think? Emma realized it was the first time he had asked her that directly. Not telling her what to do, not making the decision for her. Just asking what she thought. I think it would help, she admitted. But I also think I need to start doing these things on my own eventually. Eventually isn't the same as immediately, Michael said. There's no shame in accepting help when it's offered, especially in the beginning. You'll have plenty of chances to prove yourself solo. This doesn't have to be one of them. So you'll come? I'll book a flight. Email me the meeting details. They arrived in New York late Tuesday evening and checked into a modest hotel near Madison Avenue. Victoria had offered to arrange accommodations at a luxury property, but Emma had declined, preferring to manage her own expenses. They had dinner at a small ramen shop Michael knew from his business days, a tiny place tucked into a side street that served bowls of noodles that tasted like comfort itself. I used to come here after brutal negotiations, Michael said, savoring his broth. Something about good ramen just makes the world seem manageable again. Did you have a lot of brutal negotiations? Emma asked. Michael smiled. More than a few. International business isn't for the faint of heart. Different languages, different cultural expectations, different legal systems. Lots of ways for things to go sideways. How did you handle it? Preparation mostly. I'd research everything I could about who I was meeting with. Their company, their background, their culture's business practices. And I'd always have a local contact who could give me insider perspective. He slurped some noodles. But the most important thing was respect. Even when negotiations got tense, even when people disagreed, I always made sure everyone felt heard and valued. You can drive a hard bargain and still be decent about it. Emma thought about Victoria's initial approach, all aggression and power plays. Not everyone operates that way. No, Michael agreed. Some people think business is war. But those people usually end up with short-term wins and long-term enemies. The best partnerships come from mutual respect and shared success. They finished their meal in comfortable silence, then walked back to the hotel through streets that never quite slept. New York at night was a different creature, all lights and noise and endless motion. Emma felt small in it, but not in a bad way. More like she was part of something vast and complex. Nervous about tomorrow? Michael asked as they rode the elevator up to their rooms. A little, Emma admitted. This is a different scale than what I'm used to. If I mess this up, it doesn't just affect me. It affects my partnership with Victoria, my company's reputation, everything. You won't mess it up, Michael said with quiet confidence. You know what you're doing. Trust your instincts. My instincts tell me to be terrified. Michael laughed. That's not instinct, that's fear. Your instincts are the part that knows you prepared well and can handle whatever comes. Listen to that part. The next morning they met Victoria in the lobby of an office building in Midtown. She wore another power suit, this one navy blue with subtle pinstripes, and carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Emma's monthly rent. But her demeanor was different than it had been in Chicago. Less aggressive, more collaborative. Good morning, she said, shaking hands with both of them. The meeting is on the 42nd floor. Tanaka Investment Group. The CEO is Hiroshi Tanaka, very traditional, very formal. His CFO is Kenji Yamamoto, younger, more westernized but still respects traditional protocols. She looked at Michael. Have you worked with Japanese firms before? Extensively, Michael said. Spent 3 years stationed in Tokyo, then did business there for another decade. I'm familiar with the protocols. They rode the elevator up in silence. Emma could feel her heart beating faster. This was real. This mattered. When the doors opened, they were greeted by a receptionist who spoke to them in polite, formal Japanese. Michael responded in kind, introducing their group with appropriate honorifics and expressions of gratitude for the meeting. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly, clearly not expecting the casual American man to speak such fluent Japanese. She bowed and led them to a conference room where 3 men in dark suits waited. Hiroshi Tanaka was in his 60s, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. Kenji Yamamoto looked to be in his 40s, polished and professional. The third man was introduced as Sato, an advisor. Bows were exchanged, business cards presented with both hands as custom dictated. Michael's Japanese was flawless, his understanding of the formalities complete. Emma watched the subtle shift in the room's dynamics. Tanaka's initial wariness began to ease as Michael demonstrated not just language ability but cultural competence. The seating arrangement, the order of greetings, the exact level of formality in speech, Michael navigated it all naturally. Harrison-san, Tanaka said, his English careful and precise. Your reputation precedes you. I knew of Pacific Rim Logistics. You did good business with several firms I respect. You honor me with your knowledge, Michael replied in Japanese, then switched to English. Though I must make clear, I am here only as support. This meeting is about my daughter's company and the services she can provide. Tanaka nodded, appreciating the distinction. He turned his attention to Emma. Please, tell us about your company. Emma took a breath and began her presentation. She had prepared thoroughly, researching Tanaka Investment Group's history, their current portfolio, their expansion goals. She spoke clearly about her company's approach, emphasizing cultural understanding over simple translation. Language barriers are obvious, she said. But cultural barriers are subtle and often more damaging. A misunderstood gesture, an inappropriate gift, a breach of etiquette that seems minor but carries weight. These things can derail business relationships before they even begin. Yamamoto leaned forward. Can you give specific example? Emma had several prepared. In American business culture, we value directness and efficiency. No is a complete sentence. But in Japanese business culture, direct refusal is considered rude. Instead, you might say something is difficult to arrange or needs further consideration. An American executive hearing this might think the door is still open and push harder. A Japanese executive would understand this as a polite rejection and would feel the American is being aggressive and disrespectful by continuing to push. Tanaka nodded slowly. This is accurate observation. My job isn't just to translate words, Emma continued. It's to translate meaning and intention. To help both parties understand not just what is being said, but what is being communicated. The meeting continued for over an hour. Victoria contributed strategic insights about American markets. Michael occasionally added historical context or clarified cultural nuances. But Emma led the discussion, demonstrating the competence and understanding she had spent years developing. Finally, Tanaka sat back and conferred quietly with his colleagues in Japanese. They spoke too quickly for Emma to catch everything, but she heard phrases like impressive and trustworthy and good foundation. Tanaka turned back to face them. We are satisfied with what we have heard today. We would like to engage your services, Harrison-san. He looked at Emma. For initial consultation and cultural advisory as we establish American operations. Emma felt a surge of elation but kept her expression professionally pleasant. We would be honored to work with Tanaka Investment Group. However, Tanaka continued, we have one concern. Your company is small. If we commit to working with you, we need assurance of stability and capacity. Before Emma could respond, Victoria spoke up. I can address that concern. My company has partnered with Harrison Consulting specifically because we recognize their quality and potential. We are invested in their success. If capacity becomes an issue, Ashford Technologies will provide resources to ensure continuity of service. Yamamoto looked interested. This is formal partnership? Formal and long-term, Victoria confirmed. We believe in working with the best, regardless of company size. Tanaka seemed satisfied with this answer. More discussion followed about timelines, scope of work, and compensation. Michael occasionally offered perspective when asked, but primarily let Emma and Victoria handle the business details. His presence alone seemed to provide credibility, a signal to the Japanese executives that Emma was serious and connected. When they finally left the building 2 hours later, Emma felt like she had run a marathon. Her mind was exhausted from the concentration required to navigate such an important meeting. But underneath the fatigue was a deep sense of accomplishment. You did well, Michael said as they walked toward a coffee shop. Very well. You understood exactly what they needed to hear. I was terrified the entire time, Emma admitted. Being terrified and being competent aren't mutually exclusive, Victoria said. She actually smiled, something Emma had rarely seen from her. That was a significant contract you just secured. Tanaka Investment Group manages over $15 billion in assets. This puts your company in a completely different category. They sat in the coffee shop, decompressing from the meeting. Victoria checked her phone and announced she had to catch a flight back to Chicago but wanted to schedule a follow-up call for Friday. After she left, Emma and Michael sat together watching New York rush past the windows. Can I ask you something? Emma said. Always. When you were building your business, did you ever feel like an imposter? Like you were faking it and eventually someone would figure out you didn't really know what you were doing? Michael considered the question. Every single day for the first 5 years. Even after I had major clients and was making real money, there was always this voice in my head saying I was one mistake away from everyone realizing I was just making it up as I went. When did it stop? It didn't, Michael said. Not completely. I just learned to recognize that feeling as a sign I was pushing myself into new territory. The day you stop feeling that uncertainty is probably the day you stop growing. Emma stirred her coffee absently. Dad, why did you really quit? You were at the top of your field. You could have kept going, built something even bigger. Michael was quiet for a long moment. Your mother got sick, he said finally. Stage 3 cancer. She fought it for 2 years and won, but during that time I realized I had been missing my actual life while I was busy building a business empire. I'd missed soccer games and school plays and family dinners. I'd chosen deals over moments. And when I almost lost her, I understood that all the money and success in the world didn't matter compared to being present for the people I loved. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. She remembered that time, though she had been young. Remembered her mother being tired all the time, the hospital visits, the worry in her father's face. So I sold the company, Michael continued. Kept enough money to be comfortable, gave the rest away to causes that mattered. Started fixing things around the house. Coaching your brother's little league team. Actually knowing my kids instead of just living in the same house as them. He looked at Emma directly. I never regretted it. Not once. I'm sorry I didn't understand, Emma said. All those years, I thought you had just been some middle manager who retired early. I had no idea what you'd given up. I didn't give up anything, Michael corrected gently. I chose what mattered more. There's a difference. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. And now I get to watch you build something meaningful. Something that's yours. That's worth more to me than any business I ever ran. They sat in a coffee shop for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. Michael told stories from his business days, adventures and disasters that Emma had never heard. She told him about the early struggles of her company, the clients who hadn't paid, the moments she had almost given up. You know what strikes me? Michael said. You built your business exactly the way I built mine. Through relationships and reputation and actually caring about doing good work. You didn't need my advice because you already had the instincts. You just needed time and experience to develop them. I learn from watching you, Emma said. Even if I didn't realize it. The way you treat people, the way you value integrity over shortcuts, the way you show up for people. I absorbed all that. Michael smiled. Then I did something right after all. Their flight back to Chicago wasn't until evening, so they spent the afternoon walking through Central Park. Michael pointed out places he remembered from business trips, restaurants that had closed, buildings that hadn't existed 20 years ago. Emma listened to these stories like they were treasures she was discovering for the first time. Do you miss it? She asked. The business world, the deals, the excitement? Sometimes, Michael admitted. But then I remember the stress, the travel, the constant pressure. And I remember what I gained by walking away. Peace. Time. Actual relationships with my kids. He looked at her. Moments like this. They found a bench overlooking a pond where ducks glided across mirror-smooth water. The city sounds faded to background noise, replaced by the rustle of leaves and occasional bird calls. There's something I want to say, Emma began. About everything that happened this week. I spent so long trying to prove I could make it on my own. Being stubborn about accepting help. And I realize now that was just pride talking. You didn't swoop in and take over. You didn't overshadow what I built. You just stood beside me and made sure I got a fair shot. That's all any parent wants, Michael said. To see their kids succeed at something meaningful to them. I want you to be more involved, Emma said. Not just as an advisor when Victoria needs credibility. Actually involved. Teaching me what you know. Introducing me to people. Sharing the experience you spent decades building. She turned to face him. I was afraid it would diminish what I accomplished. But now I understand it doesn't. Your success doesn't make mine less real. If anything, learning from you makes my success more sustainable. Michael looked at his daughter with unmistakable pride. I'd like that, he said. But on one condition. You keep running your company your way. I'm there to support and advise, not to take over. This is your journey, not a replay of mine. Deal, Emma said. They shook hands formally, then laughed at the absurdity of it. Then Emma hugged her father tightly, realizing how much she had needed this week. Not just the business success, but the reconnection with someone who had always been there but whose full story she had never known. That evening on the plane back to Chicago, Emma opened her laptop and began drafting plans for expanding her company's capacity. The Tanaka contract would require hiring at least 2 more translators and a project manager. She'd need to move to a bigger office space. Set up more formal business systems. Scale without losing the personal touch that had built her reputation. Michael dozed in the seat beside her, his reading glasses perched on his nose, a business book open in his lap. Emma smiled at how he still looked like just a regular dad, not someone who had once commanded rooms full of powerful executives and negotiated deals that shaped international trade. She thought about Victoria's initial dismissal of him, how quickly assumptions could blind someone to reality. And she thought about the lesson in that, about looking deeper than surface appearances, about giving people the dignity of being seen for who they actually are rather than who they seem to be. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Jennifer Park from Business Weekly. The subject line read, "Article draft for your review." Emma opened it and began reading the profile of her company, her journey, her philosophy. It was fair and accurate, portraying her as hardworking and principled without making her sound naive or overly idealistic. But there was one paragraph near the end that made Emma pause. When asked about her influences and inspirations, Harrison becomes thoughtful. She speaks about learning through experience, through mistakes and successes both. But there's a sense of someone else in the background of her story, an unnamed mentor whose lessons she carries forward. Harrison is building her own legacy, but she's not building it from nothing. She's building it from values and instincts that were taught, even if not explicitly spoken. Emma looked at her father, still sleeping peacefully in the airplane seat. Jennifer had seen something Emma herself had only recently understood. The foundation was always there. The teacher had always been present. She just hadn't recognized it until the moment she needed to. She closed her laptop and looked out the window at the darkening sky. Below them, the landscape stretched out in patterns of light, cities and towns connected by threads of highway and railway. From up here, everything looked small and manageable, part of a larger pattern that made sense. Tomorrow she would return to her small office with its second-hand furniture and temperamental coffee maker. She would start planning her company's expansion, hiring new staff, setting up systems to handle larger clients. She would step into this new phase of her business with confidence earned through struggle and success both. But she would also do it differently than before. Not alone. Not isolated by pride or fear of dependence. She would do it with the support and wisdom of someone who had walked this path before and come out the other side with perspective intact. The plane began its descent into Chicago. Emma woke her father gently. He blinked awake, momentarily disoriented, then smiled when he remembered where they were. "Home?" he asked. "Almost," Emma said. "Almost home." 6 months had transformed everything. Emma stood in the doorway of her new office space, a full floor in a renovated building near the Chicago River, and still couldn't quite believe it was real. Glass partitions divided the space into collaborative work areas. 6 employees now worked at modern desks with dual monitors. A proper conference room with video equipment sat ready for international calls. The coffee maker actually worked every time. Rachel had been promoted to operations manager and was currently training 2 new translators, both with impressive credentials and language portfolios. Emma had also brought on Marcus, a former State Department translator who spoke Arabic and Farsi, and Lynn, whose Mandarin was even better than Emma's and who had connections throughout the Chinese business community in North America. The Tanaka contract had opened floodgates Emma hadn't anticipated. Word traveled fast in international business circles. Within weeks of that New York meeting, 3 other firms had reached out asking about her services. Then 5 more. Then a dozen. The Business Weekly article had helped, but more powerful was the network effect of reputation. Satisfied clients told their associates. Associates told their partners. Partners told their competitors who didn't want to be left behind. Victoria had been true to her word about the partnership. Ashford Technologies had provided bridge financing for the expansion and had connected Emma with a business development consultant who helped her set up proper systems for scaling. But Victoria had also kept her promise to let Emma run things her way. Advice was offered, never demanded. Resources were available, never forced. Emma walked through her new office, listening to Lynn on a conference call with a client in Beijing, watching Marcus review a technical document in Arabic, seeing Rachel coordinate schedules across multiple time zones. This was what success looked like. Not just revenue and contracts, but a functioning organization that delivered real value to real clients. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "Remember you promised to have dinner with your old man tonight. Don't cancel on me for work." Emma smiled. She had been canceling family dinners a lot lately, caught up in the whirlwind of growth. But tonight was important. Tonight was the 6-month anniversary of that confrontation in Victoria's conference room, the day everything changed. She texted back. "Wouldn't miss it. Same ramen place? How about somewhere fancier? You can afford it now. Ramen place has better memories. Ramen place it is." Emma finished reviewing the day's priority items with Rachel, then headed out into the mild spring evening. Chicago had thawed from winter's grip, and the city felt alive with possibility. Street musicians played on corners. Outdoor cafes had reopened their patios. People walked with their faces turned toward the sun instead of hunched against the cold. The ramen shop was tucked into the same side street where they had eaten 6 months ago, unchanged and perfect. Michael was already there, sitting at a small table near the window, reading a newspaper the old-fashioned way, actual paper instead of a screen. "You're early," Emma said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Retired people don't have anywhere more important to be," Michael said, folding his paper. "How was your day?" "Productive. Overwhelming. Exciting." All of the above. Emma accepted a menu from the server even though she already knew what she wanted. We closed the contract with that pharmaceutical company. The one that needed regulatory translation for their clinical trials in South Korea. That's excellent, Michael said. Big contract? Big enough to cover 3 months of overhead. Emma set down her menu. Dad, I need to talk to you about something. Michael's expression shifted to mild concern. That sounds serious. It's not bad, Emma assured him. Actually, it's good. I think. I hope. She took a breath. I want to make you a partner. Not just an advisor. An actual equity partner in the company. Michael sat back, clearly surprised. Emma, that's not necessary. I'm happy to help without any formal stake. I know you are. But it is necessary. Not because you need it, but because the company needs it. Your reputation opens doors. Your expertise solves problems I don't even know exist yet. And more importantly, you've been instrumental in building what we've become. It's not fair for you to give all that and get nothing in return. I get to watch my daughter succeed, Michael said. That's more than enough return. Dad, I'm being serious. Emma leaned forward. I've talked to my lawyer and my accountant. We can structure it so you have 20% equity but limited operational responsibility. You'd have input on major decisions, but day-to-day operations stay with me. You'd draw a modest salary as a consultant, and you'd share in the profits when we eventually sell or go public or whatever the endgame turns out to be. Michael studied her face, seeing the determination there. You've really thought this through. For 3 months. I kept talking myself out of it because I was worried you'd think I was trying to pay you off or diminish what you've given freely. But then I realized that's not what this is. This is acknowledging that what I've built isn't just mine. It's ours. We built it together, even if I didn't realize it at first. Their food arrived, steaming bowls of noodles and rich broth. They ate in silence for a few minutes, both processing the conversation. Finally, Michael set down his chopsticks. I have one condition. Name it. You keep majority control. At least 51%. This has to remain your company, your vision. I won't be a partner if it means you lose that. Emma had anticipated this. I'm offering you 20%. I keep 70%. The other 10% is reserved for future key employees as the company grows. Michael smiled. You've really become a businesswoman. That's a smart equity structure. I learn from the best. They finished their meal, discussing the details of how the partnership would work. Michael had suggestions about protecting Emma's control while still giving him meaningful input. Emma had thoughts about how to leverage Michael's network without overwhelming him with obligations. It was a negotiation, but one conducted with mutual respect and genuine care for each other's interests. As they left the restaurant, walking slowly through the pleasant evening, Michael said, You know, when I sold Pacific Rim Logistics, I thought that chapter of my life was closed forever. I had no interest in building another business or getting back into that world. I was done. Do you regret getting pulled back in? Emma asked. Not for a second, Michael said. Because this isn't about building a business. This is about building something with my daughter. That's completely different. The business is just the vehicle. The relationship is what matters. They walked a few more blocks in comfortable silence, past shops closing for the evening and restaurants just starting to fill with dinner crowds. There's something else I need to tell you, Emma said. Victoria called me yesterday. She wants to discuss something big. She was cryptic about it, but she asked if we could meet next week with you present. Any sense of what it's about? No idea. But knowing Victoria, it's either an opportunity or a challenge. Possibly both. The meeting with Victoria took place the following Tuesday in the same conference room where Emma had first been dismissed and then vindicated. Walking into that room now felt surreal, like returning to a battlefield that had been transformed into a garden. Victoria was already there with Brandon and her senior vice president of international operations, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen who Emma had worked with on several projects. They all stood when Emma and Michael entered. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said, gesturing the seats. "I'll get right to the point. Ashford Technologies is planning a major expansion into Asian markets. Not just China and Japan, but Singapore, Vietnam, Thailand, South Korea. We're talking about establishing permanent offices, hiring local staff, building real presence in a region we've only dabbled in until now." Patricia pulled up a presentation on the screen. "Maps, market analyses, projected revenues. We've been planning this for 2 years," she said. "But we kept running into the same problem. We don't have the cultural expertise or the network connections to do this right. We could throw money at it and hope, but that's a recipe for expensive mistakes." Victoria leaned forward. "We want to acquire your company, Emma. Full acquisition. We'd fold your operation into ours, make it the foundation of our Asian expansion strategy. You'd become Vice President of International Cultural Strategy, reporting directly to me. Your staff would be absorbed into our organization with raises and better benefits. And the acquisition price would be substantial." Emma felt her stomach drop. This was exactly what she had feared from the beginning. Victoria wanted to consume her company, absorb what was valuable, and erase what had been built. Before she could respond, Michael asked quietly, "What's the offer?" Patricia clicked to a new slide. The number on the screen made Emma's breath catch. It was more money than she had imagined her company could be worth. Enough to pay off all her debts, set up her employees comfortably, and leave her wealthy by any reasonable standard. "That's generous," Michael said, his tone carefully neutral. "Very generous. But I'm curious about the structure. Would Emma have autonomy in her new role, or would she be managing by committee?" "She'd have a team," Victoria said. "Budget authority up to certain limits. Input on major decisions. It would be a real leadership position, not just a title." "Input," Michael repeated. "Not final say." Victoria's expression tightened slightly. "On major strategic decisions, no. Those would go through the executive committee. But on operational matters and cultural consulting specifically, she'd have wide latitude." Emma found her voice. "You're asking me to give up my company. To work for you instead of with you." "I'm asking you to join something bigger," Victoria countered. "You've built something impressive, but there's a ceiling to how much you can grow on your own. With our resources and infrastructure, you could have impact on a completely different scale." "At the cost of independence," Emma said. "At the benefit of security and reach," Victoria replied. "Look, I understand the appeal of being your own boss. I built my company from scratch too. But there comes a point where you have to decide what you really want. Do you want to be a small boutique firm doing good work for a handful of clients? Or do you want to shape how major corporations engage with global markets? This acquisition makes the second option possible." Patricia added, "We've researched your competition. There are 3 other firms in this space who are bigger and more established. 2 of them are actively trying to recruit your key employees. One has started undercutting your pricing to steal clients. The market is getting more competitive. This offer gives you a secure exit before things get harder." Emma looked at Michael, who had remained quiet, his expression unreadable. She thought about the past 6 months, the growth and success and sense of building something meaningful. She thought about her new office, her team, the relationships with clients that went beyond just transactions. "Can I have some time to think about it?" Emma asked. "Of course," Victoria said. "But not too much time. This offer is time-sensitive. We need to move forward with the expansion in the next quarter, with or without you. I'd much prefer it to be with you, but I'll find another solution if necessary." After the meeting, Emma and Michael sat in a coffee shop across the street. Emma stared at her cup without drinking, her mind churning through implications and consequences. "What do you think?" she finally asked. Michael considered his words carefully. I think Victoria made a compelling case. The money is good. The opportunity to have larger impact is real. And the warning about competition is worth taking seriously. But? Emma prompted, sensing hesitation. But I also think you need to be honest about what you'd be giving up. It's not just ownership and independence. It's the ability to make decisions based on what you think is right rather than what a committee approves. It's the direct relationships with clients. It's the culture you've built with your team. He met her eyes. Money can't buy those things back once you've sold them. So you think I should say no? I think you should decide what success means to you. If success is maximizing financial return and corporate impact, then Victoria's offer might be the right move. If success is building something that reflects your values and operates the way you believe is right, then keeping your independence might matter more than the money. Emma rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of the decision. When you sold Pacific Rim Logistics, did you have doubts? Constantly, Michael admitted. Right up until I signed the papers. And even after. I wondered if I was walking away from something I should have kept building. Do you still wonder? Sometimes. But then I remember why I sold. It wasn't about the money. It was about reclaiming my life and my priorities. The decision was right for me at that moment. That doesn't mean it would be right for you at this moment. They sat in a coffee shop for another hour, talking through scenarios and possibilities. Michael played devil's advocate, pushing back on Emma's reasoning to help her clarify her thinking. Emma worked through her fears and ambitions, trying to separate what she actually wanted from what she thought she should want. Finally, as the sun began to set and the coffee shop started to empty, Emma said, "I'm going to say no." Michael raised his eyebrows. "You're sure?" "Not completely. But I think I'm sure enough." Emma took a deep breath. "I didn't build this company to sell it. I built it to do meaningful work in a way that felt right to me. Yes, it might be harder to compete going forward. Yes, I might be leaving money on the table. But I'd rather struggle with something that's mine than succeed at something that's been absorbed into someone else's vision." "That's a brave choice," Michael said. "Or a stupid one. I guess time will tell which." Emma managed a small smile. "At least now you're a partner, so when I crash and burn, you'll go down with me." "I've survived worse," Michael said. "And for what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. But it's going to mean making some changes. If competition is heating up, you can't just keep doing what you've been doing and expect the same results." "What kind of changes?" Michael pulled out a napkin and started sketching ideas. "First, you need to differentiate more clearly. What do you offer that competitors can't easily replicate? Second, you need to deepen your client relationships so they're not just transactional. Make yourself indispensable. Third, you need to build barriers to entry. Maybe that means specialized certifications, exclusive partnerships, proprietary methodologies. Something that makes it hard for competitors to simply copy what you do." Emma listened, taking mental notes. This was the Michael Harrison who had built a legendary business, strategic and clear-eyed about competitive realities. Not the modest retired dad, but the executive who had navigated cutthroat international markets and thrived. "We should also think about geographic expansion," Michael continued. "If Victoria is moving into Asia, that creates opportunities elsewhere. Latin America is underserved for cultural consulting. Middle East is growing. You don't have to go everywhere, but picking one or two strategic markets could give you growth that's on your terms." They talked strategy until the coffee shop staff started pointedly cleaning around them. Then they moved to a bar down the street and continued over beer and appetizers. It felt like the early planning stages of a campaign, identifying objectives and obstacles, marshaling resources and relationships. By the time they parted ways late that evening, Emma felt energized rather than overwhelmed. The decision to decline Victoria's offer meant harder work ahead, but it also meant maintaining control over that work. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but at least it would be hers. The next morning, Emma called Victoria and delivered her decision. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I have to say, I'm disappointed, Victoria finally said. I thought we had built enough trust that you'd see this opportunity for what it is. We have built trust, Emma replied. That's exactly why I'm confident in saying no. I trust that our partnership can continue even though I'm not interested in being acquired. And I trust that you respect my choice even if you disagree with it. Another pause. You understand this means we'll have to develop these capabilities internally or find another partner, right? I can't wait indefinitely. I understand. And I respect that you have to do what's best for your company. Just like I have to do what's best for mine. Victoria let out a short laugh. You're more like your father than I initially realized. Stubborn and principled in equal measure. I'll take that as a compliment. It is, Victoria said. And Emma? For what it's worth, I think you're making a mistake. But I also admire your conviction. Not many people turn down this kind of money for principle. Maybe I learned that from watching someone else do exactly that, Emma said, thinking of her father's decision to sell his company and prioritize family over empire building. After the call ended, Emma sat at her desk feeling both relieved and terrified. She had just turned down more money than most people see in a lifetime. She had chosen uncertainty over security. She had bet on herself and her vision rather than taking the safe path. Her door opened and Rachel poked her head in. Everything okay? You look like you just fought a dragon. Something like that, Emma said. Come in. We need to talk about the company's direction. Rachel sat down, notepad ready. Emma explained the offer from Victoria and her decision to decline it. She talked about the competitive pressures they would face and the need to differentiate and strengthen their position. So what does that mean for us? Rachel asked. For the team? It means we need to get better. Faster. More specialized. We need to become so good at what we do that clients would never consider going elsewhere. Emma pulled up a document she had started drafting the night before. I'm proposing we develop a proprietary methodology for cultural integration. Something we can train clients on, something that becomes the industry standard. We patent it, trademark it, make it ours. Rachel's eyes lit up. That could work. We'd need to document everything we do, formalize the processes, create training materials. Exactly. And we need to deepen our expertise in specific regions. Instead of being generalists who can work anywhere, we become the absolute experts in particular markets. Michael suggested Latin America and the Middle East as underserved opportunities. Marcus would be perfect for Middle East development, Rachel said, thinking out loud. And we could recruit someone with Latin American experience. They spent the next 2 hours brainstorming, planning, and mapping out a strategy for sustainable competitive advantage. It was exciting and daunting in equal measure. Emma had chosen the harder path, but looking at Rachel's enthusiasm and commitment, she felt certain it was the right one. That evening, Emma texted her father a simple message. I told Victoria no. Let's build something that lasts. His response came back immediately. Proud of you. Let's get to work. 2 years later, Emma stood on stage at the International Business Forum in Singapore, looking out at an audience of over 500 executives, consultants, and entrepreneurs from across the globe. The conference hall was massive, with screens projecting her presentation to every corner of the room. She wore a tailored navy suit that made her feel professional and confident, though her hands still trembled slightly as she gripped the remote control. Cultural competence isn't optional anymore, she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. It's the difference between successful expansion and expensive failure. Between building lasting partnerships and burning bridges you didn't even know existed. In the third row, Michael sat with his arms folded, watching his daughter command the stage with the same calm authority he had once brought to similar venues. Next to him sat Victoria Ashford, who had flown in specifically for Emma's keynote address. Their relationship had evolved into something neither had anticipated, a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and occasional friendly competition. Emma clicked to the next slide, showing case studies from her company's work. When we helped a tech startup navigate entry into the Vietnamese market, we didn't just translate their marketing materials. We completely restructured their approach based on cultural values around family, education, and community trust. The result was market penetration 3 times faster than their projections. The audience leaned forward, engaged and attentive. Emma had become known in international business circles as someone who delivered real results, not just theoretical frameworks. Her company, now called Harrison Global Solutions, employed 23 people across offices in Chicago, Mexico City, and Dubai. The proprietary methodology she had developed was being taught in 3 business schools. Her client list included Fortune 500 companies and emerging startups alike. After her presentation, during the networking reception, dozens of people approached with business cards and partnership proposals. Emma handled each conversation with grace, professional but warm, interested without being desperate. She had learned that the best clients came from genuine relationships, not aggressive networking. Victoria found her between conversations. That was impressive. You've come a long way from that nervous young woman in my conference room. I had good teachers, Emma said. Even the hard lessons were valuable. About that, Victoria said. I want to apologize again for how I treated you and your father that first day. I was arrogant and dismissive. I judged based on appearances instead of substance. You've apologized before, Emma reminded her. Multiple times. I think we're past it. Maybe, Victoria said. But watching you up there, seeing what you've built, it reminds me how close I came to destroying something valuable before it had a chance to grow. That bothers me. Emma smiled. If it makes you feel better, that confrontation taught me things I needed to learn. About standing my ground. About not accepting dismissal. About recognizing my own worth even when others don't see it. They were interrupted by a Japanese executive who wanted to discuss a potential project. Emma excused herself and dove into the conversation, switching effortlessly between English and Japanese as she explained her company's approach. Michael watched from across the room, feeling that peculiar mixture of pride and bittersweet awareness that your child no longer needs you in the same way they once did. Later that evening, the 3 of them had dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking Singapore's glittering skyline. The city spread out beneath them like a circuit board of light and ambition, a reminder of how connected and complex the modern business world had become. I have news, Victoria announced over appetizers. We're finally moving forward with the Asian expansion. Took us 2 years longer than planned, but we're doing it right this time. Hired a team of cultural specialists, partnered with local firms, invested in proper research and relationship building. That's exciting, Emma said. Congratulations. I wanted you to know because we'll be competing in some markets, Victoria continued. Not directly, but there will be overlap. I hope that won't damage our friendship. Michael laughed. Competition doesn't have to mean conflict. Some of my best business relationships were with competitors who pushed me to be better. Exactly, Emma agreed. Besides, the market is big enough for both of us. Different clients need different approaches. If anything, having quality competitors raises the standards for everyone. Victoria raised her glass. To healthy competition and lasting friendship. They clinked glasses and drank to the toast. The conversation drifted to other topics, family updates and travel stories and observations about the rapidly changing business landscape. It was comfortable and genuine, 3 people who had moved past their difficult beginning into something more meaningful. As the evening wound down, Victoria excused herself to take a call, leaving Emma and Michael alone at the table. The Singapore skyline glittered before them, a testament to what ambition and vision could build. Thank you, Emma said quietly. For everything. For believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. For letting me struggle when I needed to struggle. For stepping in when I needed support. For becoming my partner instead of just my father. Michael reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You did this yourself. I was just there to make sure you got a fair chance. You did more than that, Emma insisted. You showed me what integrity looks like in business. What it means to value people over profits. How to be successful without sacrificing who you are. Those lessons work both ways, Michael said. Watching you build something from nothing, seeing your determination and creativity, it reminded me why I loved business in the first place. Not the money or the power, but the challenge of solving problems and creating value. You gave me that back. They sat in comfortable silence, father and daughter, partners in business and life, looking out at a world full of possibility and challenge. Emma thought about that day in Victoria's conference room, how humiliated and angry she had felt, how close she had come to walking away from the whole opportunity. She thought about the moment her father had revealed his hidden expertise, the shock and awe and sudden shift in power dynamics. But mostly she thought about what came after. The work of building something meaningful. The satisfaction of earning respect through competence and character. The relationships forged through shared struggle and mutual support. The quiet pride of knowing she had chosen the harder path and made it work. Victoria returned to the table, phone call completed, and they settled the bill. As they left the restaurant and stepped into Singapore's warm night air, Emma felt a deep sense of contentment. Her company was thriving. Her relationship with her father had deepened into genuine partnership. She had proven to herself and others that success didn't require compromising values or accepting disrespect. The next morning, Emma had breakfast with several potential clients who had approached her after the keynote. By noon, she had signed 2 new contracts and scheduled follow-up meetings with 3 more prospects. Her phone buzzed constantly with emails and messages from people wanting to connect, collaborate, or learn more about her methodology. Michael spent the morning exploring Singapore's gardens, then met Emma for lunch at a hawker center where they ate noodles and dumplings surrounded by locals and tourists alike. It was a far cry from corporate conference rooms and luxury restaurants, but somehow more real and satisfying. I'm thinking about writing a book, Emma said between bites. About cultural competence in international business. There's interest from a publisher. You should do it, Michael encouraged. You have valuable insights to share. Would you co-author it with me? Your experience would add depth and credibility. Michael considered the offer. Only if your name comes first. This is your expertise, your voice. I can contribute, but it needs to be clearly your work. Emma smiled. This was exactly the response she had expected and hoped for. Her father supporting without overshadowing, contributing without taking over. It was the pattern they had established and refined over 2 years of working together. That evening, they flew back to Chicago, back to the office that had become the center of Emma's professional life and the renewed purpose of Michael's retirement years. The company they had built together continued to grow, not through aggressive expansion or ruthless competition, but through steady excellence and genuine care for clients and employees alike. 6 months later, Emma received an invitation to speak at a veterans organization event. The organizer mentioned that they were honoring her father for his military service and his subsequent success in business. Emma accepted immediately, and on the night of the event, she stood before a room full of veterans and their families, telling the story of a man who had served his country, built an empire, walked away from it all for family, and then returned to help his daughter build something new. My father taught me that strength isn't about domination, Emma said to the assembled crowd. It's about knowing when to fight and when to support. When to lead and when to follow. When to speak up and when to listen. He showed me that success without character is hollow, and that the most important achievements are the ones that lift others up along the way. Michael sat in the audience, uncomfortable with the attention but proud beyond measure. When Emma finished speaking and the room erupted in applause, he stood with everyone else, clapping for his daughter who had taken the lessons he tried to teach and built something better than he ever had. Later, as they drove home through Chicago's night streets, Emma said, I never thanked you properly for that day in Victoria's office. For defending me. For showing everyone who you really were. You thanked me 100 times, Michael replied. Then here's 101. Thank you, Dad. For everything. Michael smiled, keeping his eyes on the road ahead, on the future they were building together, one decision and one relationship at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.